have, or modify as it goes forward, but we treat that through that enhanced part of the policy. So with that, certainly answer any questions that the council may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freihammer. Are there questions from the council on the proposed updated policy? I did have a couple of questions. One is just to refresh people maybe who weren't paying attention the first time or didn't see this the first time. The commercial area standard is still closer spaced lighting than residential areas, if I remember correctly. So even though we're reducing the lighting, for example, in the center point area, it's still going to end up being more lighting than if that was an equivalent residential area. Am I correct in that?
Correct, yeah. The residential is basically 600 feet. The commercial with the proposed is roughly 200, 250, so almost 3 times as much lighting yet. So it depends. Some areas will be probably between 50 and 75%.
Sure. So as an example, that once again, the center point area probably has about 4 to 6 times as much lighting
Yes.
as a typical residential area as it is now. Okay. And then on the working with Excel for the addition of the intersections and marked crosswalks, is it going to be a process where we just do it sort of geographically, or are we going to prioritize for safety, or how is that going to be looked at?
We'll probably try to do the crosswalks all for sure first. We don't have near as many of those. Otherwise, we might just send the list to Excel and have them give us their feedback. Some might be really easy where you just have to attach a Cobra head. Those are very easy to do. First, if you have to put a pole and extend power, that'll take a little bit more planning. So we'll probably work with Excel to prioritize, but staff will definitely try to prioritize the crosswalks first, because the majority of the crosswalks that are identified are mid-block crossings, so less likely that a typical driver is expecting a pedestrian.
All right. No, thank you for that. Are there other questions from council? All right. We'll just check if there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item. It still appears to be the case that we don't have any members of the public. The requested action is to approve the proposed streetlight policy as attached in as attached to the council packet.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to approve the streetlight policy as presented. Discussion on the motion. As the maker of the motion, Councilmember Schroeder.
I think we've had a lot of discussion on this already, so I'm comfortable where it's at.
All right, as the seconder, Councilmember Strawn.
Totally agree.
All right. Any other discussion or concurrence with that?
Concurrence,
It
yes.
seems that way. All right. Well, once again, we have the motion before us to approve the streetlight policy as presented. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That policy is approved 4-0. Thank you again, Mr. Freihammer. That then brings us to item 7C, which is to consider a draft of a lodging establishment licensing ordinance. This item is something that the legislature gave us the ability to put into place at the last legislative session, and Mr. Trudgeon, our city manager, has been heavily involved in this throughout the process of both getting the legislation as well as developing the ordinance. And so Mr. Trudgeon will be the presenter this evening.
Yes, it will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I'd be sitting down here so I could see you versus turning my neck to the right there. So thank you for introducing the topic. This is real exciting for the city of Roseville. At least we're at the next stage of looking to establish licensing requirements for our lodging establishments. I have a lot of background in here that I know that all of you are familiar, but I thought it'd be helpful just to walk through here a little bit, and then we'll get into the specifics of the ordinance. So with that, so as mentioned, the past couple of years, one of our main legislative priorities have been requesting the legislature pass a law that allows us to directly license lodging establishment. Currently, hotels are licensed more for environmental, health, and sanitation purposes by the Ramsey County, but we did not have the ability under the current state law to actually regulate or license hotels unless we took over the health authority. So that's why we needed special legislation. And this is really borne by persistent problems at several of our hotels that range from police calls to medical calls to code compliance calls, fire code issues that we just saw over and over again. We started this whole process and how do we try to deal with that? How do we have tools to make sure those things are corrected? with the repeat nuisance. That's something that we had in the books for a while for residential properties and multifamily properties. But in 2021, we did amend our code to specifically have a standard for lodging establishments where if more than 10 calls per month were at a lodging establishment, they would be charged a nuisance fee of like $250. And we've been having that in place since 2021. You may ask why 10? Well, as we looked at the data, it was really just at police calls by themselves. We saw a big difference of hotels. Of the 12 hotels we have, 3 of them were consistently in double digits of calls per month, while the other hotels, and there's a chart here showing, I'll show in a second, that were under single digits on a per month basis. So in 2021, we had 3 hotels averaging 18 to 45 calls per month. The average number was 3 per month for the other 9 hotels. Since then, we have seen some reduction in numbers of calls. That's partially because 2 of the 3 hotels we entered into memorandums of understanding. This is something that was allowed in the nuisance section that required them to do certain things such as video surveillance, locked doors, and things like that. So we have seen a lessening of calls. However, I think as the police and fire department can attest, and even our code folks can attest, there continues to be problems there. Oftentimes they're not initiated by the hotel. Just leaving that out there that even though there's a lot of activity out there, they're not officially breaking the 10 calls per month threshold here. We've seen that drop, but as can be seen, I think in the next slide here, we still see fairly high amount of calls in comparison to our other hotels. If you look at 2023, you see 15 calls, 6.75 and 8.58, with the nearest one at 5, and everything else pretty low numbers. And you can see that trend from 2018 where we had 39 calls and 23 calls and 12 calls and 8. And it does vary each year, year to year. You can see in 2021, actually DoubleTree was up a little bit, but that was kind of more of a standout year versus a trend. You can see how this has trended over time. The 3 hotels are consistently above that threshold and remain that way even after entering into the MOU. The Norwood and Key Inn were subject to an MOU, so just to give you some perspective on there. So that was really the basis of why we instituted the repeat nuisance, because of the amount of calls that hotels, these 3 hotels in particular, were giving us and tying up our resources. We certainly understand we're a busy city. We understand hotels, you have a lot of people congregate there, stay there, and there's going to be issues there for sure as you get people together. And what we were saying with this was that we understand that, and we're happy to respond and deal with those things as they come up. But when there are so many calls in one particular place that taking away our resources, and there does not seem to be any institutional control to make sure that those calls are lessened for a variety of reasons, whether security or practices for renting out their space and other control throughout the day and night, that there needs to be some action taken. Having said that, we felt that licensing was probably the more effective way to go about it, because that way we could make sure that they're adhering not just to repeat nuisance and police calls, but also other code issues, to make sure that there's basic standards that people can expect when staying in Roseville that are met. There are some very unsafe and unsanitary conditions in our hotel, in some hotels, and we want to make sure we have the ability to correct that. Our goal here isn't to shut down hotels. Our goal is to have hotels comply with very basic minimum standards that are safe for people, that is not a drain on our resources. So, some of the things that happened, once again, I know the council is familiar with that. In 2018, there was an overdose death of somebody dealing, this was heroin and fentanyl that led to a death of a young lady. In 2017, we had somebody actually at another hotel deal heroin to a guest, and this person was employed by the hotel, and that person is now in jail, thank goodness. But these are things that we're seeing on a regular basis. Once again, a hotel can't always control who maybe rents a room, what happens in their rooms. When we see this repeated pattern of very serious criminal activity and that leads to death, I think that behooves us to take appropriate action to make sure that our hotels are safe and can have people stay there without this chaos and this death and this violence around them. We also see a multitude of code violations. These are just some examples of what we've come across, and several of our hotels have ongoing building safety issues and code issues. They include non-functioning fire suppression systems, inoperable smoke alarm systems, broken windows, flooding, mold issues in common areas in the rooms, and abandoned vehicles in their parking lots. And for those that have been on the council for a few years, oftentimes, or a couple times, we brought forward revocation of occupancy presence because of these code violations, and we've had the conversation here at the council. And typically, what's happened in those past cases is they go right to the limit and then make the most minimal changes, do enough to get the CO back, certificate of occupancy back. But we know as we go back a few months later, we see some of the same problems. So we really felt strongly, and I appreciate the council's support on this, to really pursue a legislative solution to allow us to directly license hotels. So last year, the state legislature did pass a bill that does allow municipalities to license hotels. Lodging establishments is probably the best way to say it. It was very basic legislation. What you see on the top right there is the total law. It just says that we can require lodging establishments to comply with state and local laws as a condition of the license. We did cap the license fee to $150. You can see Chief Scheider testifying down to the legislature. We were joined by Ramsey County Attorney John Choi in support of this. And actually, we had, I think, Deputy Chief Adams even testified at one point for one of the hearings, and very positive support from the legislature across the board there. And I think the only challenge we had was Hospitality Minnesota. I was a little bit concerned about what this would play out in the rest of the state. They certainly understood the reasons why Roseville's doing it. So we did work with them the best we can, and continue to work with them. And I've shared this draft ordinance with them, and they have no particular objection with what we're doing here. They understand why we're doing it. Of course, there's always the concern about unintended consequences or effects that happens, and sometimes you're not going to know until you put this in place here. But overall, it's been pretty understood why we're doing it. We also held a meeting on February 15th with the hotel operators here in Roseville. Worked very closely with Visit Roseville as well. We had 8 of the 12 hotel operators in attendance, as well as several members of the largest hotel operator, TPI, that has 4 hotels here in Roseville. Some higher up folks there in attendance, and they also serve on the board of Hospitality Minnesota. So once again, we're trying to have a very good constructive dialogue. And to be honest, as a result of that meeting, we're able to tweak some language in the draft code that you have in front of you tonight to address some of their concerns on there. So throughout this process, we try to be very transparent on why we're doing it, and trying to mold the ordinance in a way that will work for us and provide us additional tools to deal with some problem hotels. So let's get right into the actual ordinance. And this is just a quick summary of the ordinance, but there's a couple definitions. We define hotel, motels, and lodging establishments as referenced under state statutes, just to be clear in what we're governing here. We do have a term called interested persons, and this is comprised of people that will be on-site managers of the establishment, owners or operators of the hotels, as well as anyone that has 5% interest in the entity applying for holding a license. We want to make sure that we, in that description, capture people that have control over the hotel and can make decisions as part of that hotel, and are there on a regular basis to make sure things are maintained properly and behavior is orderly. We also define licensed premises, so this does not just include the actual building, hotel, but includes the surrounding area, such as a parking lot or any other such spaces they may have under their control. We want to make sure it's very clear that it's not just limited to what's inside the building, it's outside of the property as well. We define our nuisance-related activities that we can define a nuisance. This is a pretty expansive list of things that could be determined to be a nuisance. sex trafficking or prostitution, public nuisances as defined under the state statutes, nuisances under city code and noise violations, that's chapter 405, 407s are nuisances, unlawful sale, possession of controlled substances, unlicensed sales of alcoholic beverages, unlicensed sales of cannabis and low potency hemp products, that's something we need to add given the changes in state law, unlawful gifts or unlawful consumption to persons under 21 of those products, unlawful use or possession of firearm parts, violations of state law or city ordinances related to licensed activities, and then actions which constitute disorderly conduct under state statute. So we try to cast a pretty wide net there, so we have all potential violations that could be determined to be a nuisance covered by that. Some of the basics in 31702, we obviously would ask all hotel operators to fill out an application. We do require them to receive a license to actually operate, and that license would be approved by the city council. As part of the application, we want a listing of all interested persons related to the lodging establishments, and we will do background checks, criminal background checks, on all folks that are listed as interested persons. We would also make sure that the establishment is inspected, both initially before the license is granted and continually throughout the process, whether that's renewal or if there are complaints. We may impose reasonable conditions on the license, such as requiring certain things to be done for that hotel. This can be done at the start when we issue the license, all the way through in the middle of the license, or a renewal of the license, and that could vary depending on what the need is. And there might be some standard conditions we might want to put, but I would imagine too, depending on each individual hotel and the situation that we see them in, we may have some additional conditions as part of that. We also have an ability to waive certain requirements based on those conditions, as long as we enumerate them in the conditions. An example of that, and this came back from the feedback from our meeting with the hotel operators, is that we don't allow for interested persons or employees to stay at the hotel. Flashing back to the 2017 incident when you had somebody on site there 24/7 doing some pretty bad things, we do not want to see a repeat of that. But they did raise a question about, as owners of multiple hotels in Roseville, oftentimes corporate will come to the hotel, stay overnight, check the operations, to meet with staff, and maybe be there for a day or two. And we wanted to make sure we could accommodate situations, very specific situations like that. And that is something we would write into the conditions as we approve that. So this hotel can have certain people stay over night as long as they're conducting business, as an example. We'll have to work on that. So there's other examples that you may think of. So instead of just making that special exception, we did have the ability for us to waive some requirements depending on the specific need. And once again, that will be listed on the license and the conditions, so it's very clear. It's not a handshake agreement, not just because Pat said so. It's going to be more listed out there and very, very clear on what can be done and what can't be done. Let's see here. Oh, the extended stay permit. Had some questions on that. So we did think that it's important to call out stays that are longer than 30 days. We do have some hotels that have people staying in a hotel for a lot longer than 30 days. Becomes a living arrangement in some cases. Oftentimes, that's fine. Other times, it can lead to some particular problems and activities in the room that either maybe not criminal, but are dangerous. For instance, bringing in hot plates or other things to cook their meals in a hotel that's not set up, a hotel room that's not set up to do that, for instance. So those are things that we at least want to make sure we understand what hotels are going to allow for stays longer than 29 days. One is just for information, so we're aware of that. But two, to make sure that the arrangements set up for that are appropriate. There's appropriate facilities and safeguards to make sure that that is not going to be a problem. Some hotels do it as a regular business model, and they design rooms in a certain way. Other hotels may not, and so we want to make sure there's at least a pause along the way to make sure we understand what they're proposing, what they're doing, and making sure there's appropriate things in place that we can be confident that that's not going to be an issue. As it's written right now, we expect to renew the license annually around January 1st. I can have some conversation depending on the timing of when we actually approve that. My sense is that we would want to get some licensing going, obviously this year, and then so it might be for a 6-month period initially. Let's just say. Then at the start of 2025, they would have to have a new license in place. If the application is denied, the initial application, they have the right to appeal, and that would probably play out coming to the city council to make that final decision on that. I do expect that we're going to be very thoughtful and deliberate on any decision and have the council weigh in as much as possible throughout that process. Oftentimes, there's kind of the administrative step where staff may deny it or recommend denial for something or some conditions that we would expect that would make its way up to the council for final approval on that. If a license application is denied, the applicant will have to wait 12 months before applying again for lodging establishments. So that effectively means they would not be able to operate a hotel for a year. There's always going to be the concern about the transition. If we deny a license and it's currently operating as a hotel, there is some language in the draft ordinance that they have 15 days to cease operations. And so that's going to be a challenge. I don't want to say that it's not, because you're going to be dealing with real people and situations that people have to relocate. But at the same time, we need to have some process where it stops being a hotel until they are eligible, and then assuming they're eligible, that they can comply with all of our regulations. So some basis 31703 talks about the basis of denial for licenses, and I think this is mostly kind of at the get-go, at the initial issuance of it, and what you would expect: not complying with relevant health and safety codes, an interested person having a license suspended or revoked in another city or someplace else, repeat nuisance service call imposed by the city of Roseville or by another jurisdiction, being delinquent in property taxes, assessments, or other financial claims such as lodging taxes or utility charges. And then an interested person that has oversight of the day-to-day operations, having one or more criminal convictions relating to lodging establishments. So we're once again trying to cover the gamut of things that potentially could be problematic in making sure that the operation of the hotel is safe. And these are things that we'd be looking at pretty hard. I would say that each case is going to be individual, and we'll weigh the situation accordingly. And there's always an issue of magnitude, also history, and the impacts it does have. But I know that we're going to look at this very carefully, because we don't want to set up a situation where we know there's particular issues that haven't been addressed and ignore them, wait for a year for something to happen, and then try to take some action. So we'll rely on this pretty heavily as we do the initial scrutiny to make sure that they're complying to these type of requirements. 31704 gets into the minimum standards of operation. There's a long laundry list of them, but making sure that people are registered in the room, providing suitable identification, informing the city of any illegal activities, having video surveillance systems in the first place, but also proper maintenance and access to that by our law enforcement folks, prohibiting the rental of hotel rooms on an hourly basis. There is an exception in there for truck companies, but generally speaking, we can't make it out for the hourly basis. Not permitting the residency of a lodging establishment for more than 30 days unless they have an extended stay permit, and the residence and the staying of persons of interested person, employee, manager, or contractor at the lodging establishment to get at some of the persistent problems we saw in some of the hotels. And as I said, that was something that was raised by the hotel operators as being something that may not work for their particular hotel, and so having that ability to waive certain requirements would give us that ability to work through that for that particular hotel. We want to make sure there's a register of persons who are staying at the lodging establishments if we have to do some follow-up. And then also, this is pretty basic, but doesn't always happen, cooperating with authorities in response to an emergency call for service or reports of suspicions or of illegal activity. We want to make sure that the owner and their employees are working with us to resolve an issue versus being not helping us. This is the best way to say it. 31704 also goes into minimum standards of operations, and these are just some basics: a proper entry door, toilet, lavatory, bathtub, a shower, heating and air conditioning, a smoke detector and fire sprinkler, closed closet, and 24-hour access to telephone access. That became an issue in one of our hotels when we had just had an incident. We want to make sure that people in that room can call 911 services or the front desk. So once somebody does have a license, we have a range of penalties that can be done. Anything from a fine to an imposition of additional reasonable conditions to suspension of a license to all the way to the revocation of a license. Any of these measures would need to be imposed after a full notice of the allegations and opportunity for to be heard regarding the allegations and penalties. Imagine for some of the minor things that might be coming from staff, and they could appeal to me on that, and then if they didn't like what I decided, they could appeal to the council. I think this is my preference, but I think for some of the larger items like suspension and revocation, we would want to bring to the council for a final decision. But hopefully we won't get there. Once again, our intention isn't to shut down hotels, but we need to have tools in place to make sure that the proper behavior and conditions are met for the community expectations. So, one more. These are the what can be. How am I trying to say this? The penalties that we would impose would be based off of these things. So, minimum standards, non-compliance with law, imposition of repeat nuisance service calls. Because I would say that is still in effect as well. And we're not getting rid of that. Arrest related to illegal activities occurring on the premises, state violation of state health codes, nuisance calls, maintaining premises to all code standards, failure to follow correction orders, interested person with a criminal conviction relating to lodging establishments, failure to notify of additional interested persons that are part of the ownership, and then failure to pay taxes, assessment, utilities, and local lodging tax. Once again, this is as they have the license in place. If these things occur during the place, we can then institute a penalty from a fine all the way up to the revocation. The last thing, I think that was the last of my slides there, is that in your packet is the racial equity toolkit. We did look at that, thought very carefully about what we were doing here. Some of our hotels that are problem hotels are lower budget related hotels, and we would expect that the standards would certainly impact them more than more of the corporate owned hotels. And certainly the people that stay at those places don't have all the means. So we're well aware of the potential impact some of our enforcement may have in the short term on those hotels and the people staying there. But we also think that it's important that we have standards that we can all expect when we walk into a hotel. And just because you can't pay a lot for a hotel room doesn't mean you should settle for anything less. So we feel comfortable in going ahead with these, knowing that in the short term it might be challenging, but long term everybody should be better off, and we'll have better hotel operators in the city of Roseville. So with that, I will pause and be happy to answer any questions. City attorney worked great on this. I think we had 14 drafts before it was finally done, and all the staff behind me here all worked on it as well, and we're part of it. It's going to be a massive undertaking once we pass this, because this is something that we're not necessarily staffed for. We don't have a hotel license guru. It's going to be a collective action by all of us, and we're going to work together. And we know initially implementing this will take a lot of work, but we all feel it's worth it, because I've been city manager for 10 years, and we've been talking about hotels for at least that long, and we continue to have problems. So we really hope we can get to the bottom of some of the root causes and not have the continual problems we see in certain hotels. So with that, I will pause.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Are there questions for staff from members of the council? Councilmember Strawn?
I have many, but I'll start here. I don't see anything in there requiring a minimum age for the renters. Is that something that we can place in our requirements?
I don't see why we couldn't. I'm not sure what state law says, and I'm looking to the attorney in here. We don't have that specifically called out. You're right about that. I'm not sure if persons under 18 can rent a room in the first place under state law, but I don't know.
I've made a note.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
we'll check on that.
Yeah, I just think especially if we're concerned about underage drinking, I know that proms and other things like that can be a very big night for people. Obviously, their parents can rent rooms for them, but if they can't rent it themselves, that maybe helps deter a little bit. Is there any way that we could require that they're current on their utilities in order to have a license?
Yep, absolutely. And so when they're delinquent in the utility
Okay.
bills, that's something we can not issue a license in the first
Okay.
place, or suspend, fine, revoke for that. So that's language we made sure was in there because we see that on a regular basis.
Perfect. Is there a possibility that another type of building could fall into the lodging establishment category? Like apartments that maybe would be rented on a short basis, maybe some of our short-term rentals, a condo, a bed and breakfast, rooming house, resort, and kind of what provisions have we made for those possibilities?
Well, we have the definition of hotel, motel, and lodging establishments as defined under state statutes. I can't say I can recite exactly
Yeah,
what
and
that
I
all
looked
covers.
those up, but yeah.
Also look at the city attorney if you know of any difference between what we're talking about now, what is potentially could be covered by this as well under the.
I think the biggest difference I saw was that in the state license, state information, it was 5 or more rooms, and I don't see that added to our ordinance. That the definition was 5 or more rooms under the Minnesota statute.
Councilmember, well, I will check on that, but I remember when we wrote the lodging establishment definition in the hotel motel, we referred directly to state law. So I will make sure that that is accurate, and maybe it might be smart to make it clear too.
Okay.
So we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, I just want to know, I know we had a conversation within the last year with a condo owner who most of the condo units were no longer being rented or occupied and were condo units. I don't know that they would fall under this short term, but I know that when I've stayed at Airbnb type things, there have been times when I've stayed in apartment buildings and they've rented out the individual pieces by night. So I don't see when I do a cursory search that there are establishments, but I feel like if we could be proactive and kind of plan for the possibilities, it would be helpful.
Well, Councilmember Strawn, I will tell you that within this rental space between a rental license, an Airbnb, a hotel, a motel, a B&B, there's a lot of ambiguity caused by the way the world has changed in the last 10 years. So what I can, I think that'll continue to evolve in the definitions that we apply and the way that cities regulate them. But we may have to learn a little bit while we're flying here to figure out how these things work. I've talked to some of my colleagues working for other cities, and nobody's had a problem come up yet, but we all are kind of aware that maybe that could happen.
Okay.
And maybe if I could just clarify too, I don't think our intent is to license people who are doing short-term rentals in homes or condos or that sort of thing. So unless I'm wrong about that, if we can be more clear in our language and definitions, I agree that would be helpful. And I do know in looking at that, as we were looking at our short-term rental licensing program at the time, it seemed fairly distinct in the state law up to a point. But yeah, to the extent we can be clear about it, I think that makes sense.
Just my
Councilmember
final,
Strawn.
I have one comment. I'm sad that the $150 seems quite inadequate for the amount of effort, especially background checking. That's 2 background checks.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So the fee for license fee is $150, but we can also charge for the background check. So
Okay.
we covered that, but the overall fee is capped at $150, which is pretty low. That was something that, as we're going through the legislature, there was some concern about cities overcharging. So that was an amendment based on the hospitality industry to put in there. And from my perspective, the money didn't matter so much. I just wanted the law passed in the first
Right.
place. So.
Certainly. Well, and the last thing, I was just wondering if there was going to be any impact on the ordinance or the ability for any of the establishments to gain licensing based on the MOU that's currently in effect. So if you have a understanding with some of these problematic, will that impact any of their licensing options?
Well, my sense is that what was contained in those MOUs would, at the minimum, be part of their license conditions,
Okay.
right? So right from the get-go, and we'd probably add to that. The MOU was kind of a bridge since we didn't have any formal requirement that we can make them do stuff that they could voluntarily enter. So I would imagine those would, while maybe still existing, become a little bit more moot, and just the license would take, really have the teeth in making sure those things are done properly.
Sure, thank you.
And just on that point, I would imagine that if somebody was delinquent in their performance under a memorandum of understanding, that could be taken into account in terms of the consideration of a license application. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Shorter, and then Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I just have a few questions. You touched on this, the extra resources that the city's gonna need to do this. I think you talked about an additional person to oversee it, or who will be doing the inspection? I assume it'll fall into the fire department's realm,
So I'm sorry, Councilmember Shore, if I misspoke. I'm not saying we need to have a person to do this. I'm saying since we don't have a person doing
Okay,
this, it's
but
gonna
will
be
we
collective
need one?
action.
Yes.
And I would say while this will take a lot of work to initiate and especially to educate first time around, we're all spending that time right now dealing with that because of the problems. The sense is that it's going to be the actual license and the application will be handled in administration. Fire will do the fire inspections, community development will do the community development inspections that they have. Police will weigh in as well as regarding calls and conditions and what we'd want to do. So it's really going to be a team effort that we would meet on a regular basis, especially from the get-go, to really sort out the particular issues at each hotel and talk through, involving the city attorney as well as we look at those conditions.
So you think you have enough resources at least to start with this?
Yes, I think
Okay.
we do, yeah. I think the ongoing maintenance of this whole process, yet to be seen how much time it's going to take. I do think it's really important out of the gate to make sure we set the standard, and I think if we get the expectations out there, like any other program, there's going to be some busy times of the year, but hopefully it's not going to be too burdensome, but time will tell.
Okay, great. And then we talked about the motel hotel holds the license, but then you have this interested party piece. So I'm a little confused on that. So you'd have one of the interested parties actually applying for the license. But it almost sounds like, say, if someone was the owner and then there was a manager who's also an interested party and they did something wrong, could that then cause the license to be suspended even though they're not the ones that applied for the license?
So, and I'll look to the attorney here, but we're asking for the entity, the business, to apply for the license, so that would typically be the owner. The interested person is, as you described, could be the manager, it could be somebody that's 5%, could be the operator of the hotel, it could be the actual owner.
There are multiples.
If any one of those persons has a particular violation, we can hold that license holder, being the business, accountable for actions, whether it's a fine, suspension, revocation. But it's really, the license is with the business and the owner. I'm looking to Ms. Tierney to see if I'm.
Little gray.
He's close. It's more about who is gonna run the place. And so, a corporation is a faceless name. It's
right.
just words. And so what you need to know as a licensing authority is who's going to operate the place, and are they a good operator? So if we have someone, for example, who just came over here from Wisconsin where they ran a brothel instead of a hotel, do we have to give them a license? No. And we're not going to track that to a corporate entity. That's not how corporations work. They change their names.
Right.
We track that to a person. And so we want to know who the important people are in the corporation, in the business, so that we can make sure whoever's operating the hotel is suitable to operate the hotel. We do this in liquor licenses and other similar licenses where we dig just a little bit deeper into who's operating the establishment, so we make sure that they can safely operate it and that the public isn't put at risk by who is operating the establishment.
Well, I think about so you have night managers and day managers, and the turnover with employees could be, frequent, and that's kind of more where I was getting at. Yet you may have a general manager, but then you'll have the night manager and the weekend manager, And so any one of those could cause an issue then.
I would say generally, the way that most cities would look at something like this in, and obviously not in Minnesota, not with hotels, but with, you know, liquor licenses or bars or something like that, they'll look at a general manager, probably not dig as deep as the assistant manager, but the general manager. Because what can happen in certain organizations that aren't running the way that cities would, aren't being staffed by individual cities would believe are qualified, they'll have a license denied and then they'll switch the name to their buddy next door and now they're the general manager. And that's really what the purpose of the interested person is to dig deeper into, to make sure that the people running the place are the people you believe are running the place.
Okay, the higher up level.
Yeah.
And then my last question is on the background investigation, the background check. What is it that we are actually looking at when we're doing that? And I know there were some things that could happen that would prevent them from getting a license, but what specifically is there something else that you might find in this background other than some of the things you mentioned that could possibly disqualify them?
Again, this is really, it's a criminal background check.
Okay, it's not their credit or
No,
anything. It's
we're not
just
running
criminal.
we're running
Okay,
a
that's
criminal
what I was
background check.
wondering.
And then just so you know, you run a criminal background check, you're limited by a couple things. One of them is in order to disqualify a person from obtaining a license, or in this case from being an interested person, their background check would need to have some kind of crime that related to the business itself. So if someone wants to work as a desk manager and they had a DWI 5 years ago, we don't care. We can't care. There's also a state law on denying a license based on criminal convictions. The city has to evaluate how old it was, how related it is to the occupation, and then also tell the person, hey, we're denying you this license for this reason, and they have a right to rebut that and say, I'm rehabilitated, I'm off probation, here's my probation officer's name, and we have to take all of those things into account in denying a license.
Good, no, that's good to know. Great, thank you. That's all I had.
And just clarification, the other thing that we can look at, though, as was brought up by Mr. Trudgeon, is if they've had a license denied or suspended for similar operations in another jurisdiction, which I don't know if it comes up in a criminal background check necessarily, but it's something we're also looking at. Under the same category as being appropriate to have the license.
How would you find that?
Generally, the license application will ask if they've owned businesses in other places. That's one way, and sometimes we hear rumors from other cities and figure it out that way.
Okay, thank
You know,
you.
for instance, on our massage therapist license, we do ask where they've held a license and if the license has been revoked on the application. So it's supposed to tell us. If they don't, we find out, that's also an ability for us to deny that massage therapist license. But yeah, there's oftentimes there's a word out there that certain operators may not be
Okay, thank you.
appropriate.
And just one final clarification, we wouldn't necessarily deny based on the rumor, we would still have to confirm the information
Yes.
first. Yes, okay, just to be clear. Councilmember Graff, thanks for your patience.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, there's so many concerns I have about the gray areas here. So I'm really glad that you're saying that this is an ongoing process because I can see tons of unintended consequences coming up with this. And I understand our big goal, and I'm totally on board with that because I would like to reiterate, most of our hotels are run very well in Roseville. We have a few problems, and those are the ones we're targeting. The conversation tonight could be misconstrued as we have a terrible problem with all the hotels in Roseville. We do not. So having said all of that, I am concerned about the extended stay. There are people that do that. I've known people who came to work in a city for a number of months, and they just wanted a hotel room. Why would we make that a requirement, I guess is what I'm asking.
And Councilmember Graff, you're talking about the requirements and how the room is set up in
Yes.
particular? Yeah, so we did put that in there to make sure that if somebody was gonna be an extended stay, which is more than 29 days, and I think we cap it at 6 months, if I recall, that there are certain things, since they're staying there more like a residence than just a guest, that there are some facilities as part of that, in that room, that would be more expected for somebody that's staying there for a longer period of time. So some business models and some hotels have those extended stay, where they have multiple rooms and a full kitchen. That's not always the case, of course. And so once again, getting back to that waiver, if there is a restaurant or a dining area in the place, for instance, we may say you don't need to have a kitchen in this particular instance. What we want to get away from is people just renting hotel rooms out, just a standard hotel room, and having people stay there for months and not really understand what's happening in those places, whether it's a heavy content, there's a lot of junk in there, or they're doing cooking in there that they shouldn't be doing. So that's the intent. But I understand where you're coming from. I think there's kind of a two edges to this, that if we overly regulate, we're going to impact some people perhaps unfairly. And while we're trying to get at some of those persistent problems, and once again, this isn't saying you can't have an extended stay. It's that we just need to be notified that you're proposing this, and then we look at that specific situation to make sure that is actually an extended stay versus just having somebody stay there for 3 months because they have no other place to go, which raises some other issues, I understand. But it's not just for a traditional business model where they have extended stay for people coming in town because they're working on a construction project or in town as a part-time job or something like that. So, yeah.
Or they're under a contract for a number of months or something. Yeah, that does bring up another issue, is because of the way that's worded. One of the things I really don't want us to see is increasing our homelessness problem by putting undue burden on, some people don't have the first and last month's rent, so they are staying in a motel or a hotel as housing, and it continues on longer than probably even they would like, but they're not in a financial position to do that. I would really hate to see the city putting people out on the street. We already have problems with people living in parks with that situation, so I think we need to think about that and address that, because that is not where I would want to head with this ordinance. Other than that, oh, the other thing would be is if we revoke a license and they have 2 weeks' notice, that does create a problem for people that have already booked in those hotels. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but that is another concern I would have. So those are the things that I made notes on. I don't know if you had the answers to anything there, but.
Right. Councilmember Strawn, you had a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, while I fully understand that, I'm hopeful that most of our hotels don't want to be in the position of having their license revoked, or even a possibility of it. My extended family is coming to stay in 2 weeks, and it's embarrassing to say, please don't stay at these hotels. Don't look at those hotels. I don't want them to inadvertently go to one of these places that I know isn't somewhere where I would be embarrassed that if this is the first time to Minnesota and this is where they're going to stay, to hang out with me. I mean, I'd rather have them sleep on my floor, and they don't want to do that. So I appreciate that all of those things. I'm hopeful, as I think you probably are, that we're calling them to a higher standard. The goal isn't to shut them down, but to require and impel them to bring their facilities to a higher standard so that it is not necessary. At least that would be my thought, is that if they didn't want to be in the business of having a hotel, then they should sell the hotel to someone else and move on. And maybe we can encourage them by having very strict standards. If they can't operate the hotel for a year after losing the license, then maybe, some other budget hotel would be happy to come in, do some renovations, and start over with a better process. So that's just my thought.
Right. And I'm going to follow up on some of the things that were brought up, as well as a couple of questions I had. So we say in the ordinance that the effective date is when it's published. You alluded to talking about sort of when you would start the licensing process. And so I'm wondering if we want to talk to that in our ordinance as to when we're going to begin to issue licenses after the passage of the ordinance, and some of that plan, just so that the hotel operators in Roseville can understand that. I think that would be something to think about. The other thing is, we talked about the time of the year with the January 1st, December 31st timeframe. I know all of our liquor licenses are on that schedule. I know a number of other licenses are on that schedule. If from the point of view of staff time and everything, if we want to look at changing that to a, July 1st to June 30th calendar, just to make it a little easier for staff, I'm only bringing it up as a possibility, just to because I know we have a lot of things on that January 1st to December 31st schedule. The other thing was, on the initial application, and if there is a background check, and I think actually I just saw that was addressed in the code. If a particular interested individual, fails a background check or something like that, it sounds like they have the ability to make a correction to their whatever, change ownership or not have that individual involved or something like that, and before a full denial happens necessarily, although I suppose if they don't undertake to do that, we would still probably deny at that point. Am I correct in that? I see nodding from the
Well, and we could also do, sometimes within a corporation, or if you have, a family that owns something, you'll have someone who's ineligible for whatever reason. You can also, you can address that in a license condition where you're going to allow it, but they're going to agree that this individual won't have certain responsibilities.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was part of the thought process. And then just maybe to the comments some of the council members have made, I think I tend to agree about the concern about sort of, taking people out of a situation that they're using for housing. I would hope that, we've got certain standards for, what an extended stay minimum requirements are, that there may be some flexibility where if an establishment can demonstrate that they've addressed an issue in a way that maybe not spelled out exactly in the code, that might be something to consider as they come forward and want to get that extended stay permit. Only from the point of view of there may be a solution that isn't delineated here but works adequately in practice or something like that we could make a condition of that permit. And so just thinking about that, because I know absolutely I would be very concerned about people having a lot of possessions in their room and perhaps cooking with a hot plate or something like that. I mean, these are things that I'm sure drive firefighters crazy, is those possibilities. And I completely understand that. And I think that is what this is trying to get at, is that there are ways to do extended living that provides some sort of minimum standard that protects the life, safety, and health of people in the building, but also the building itself, and provides for adequate facilities for those individuals. So I think that's what we're trying to get at, and if we need to do anything with the language to sort of allow for some discretion in our ability to issue those permits and have conditions that address some of those concerns, that would be something that might be a way to address some of those initial concerns. But I completely understand what's being brought up there. The other thing is, it may make sense to have some specific consultation with the operators about that sort of if your license is revoked or not approved for renewal, the wind down period of 15 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is. It may need to be longer than that, but I would only do that if that's kind of what the folks that operate the hotels are telling us, because I think that in reality, if a hotel has a major fire tomorrow, they're going to have to, rebook people. They're going to have to deal with a lot of issues, and they're probably going to do it a lot faster than 14 days. So, it's not like this industry doesn't have some understanding of dealing with those types of things. And potentially, I would imagine if there's a denial or a revocation on in the offing, it's not something that's going to be necessarily unexpected by this operator. So. Maybe the 14 days is adequate, but if it needs a little more conversation, maybe that's an opportunity to do that. I think those were the major things I had. And then just a very, very, very minor thing on line 292 in 317.04 B3. I believe that it is intended to say that the pages of the book need to be 8 by 10 inches rather than saying the book itself is to be 8 by 10 inches. So that's just my suggestion, insert pages of, because I think that's what people tend to measure rather than the book itself. So, Mr. Trudgeon.
If I just could, just to follow up, thank you, Councilmember Graff, for bringing forward the fact that we have very good hotels in our community. And I almost always lead off whenever I talk about this that we have really great hotels, and I failed to do that today. So thanks for pointing that out. We have some really great businesses that operate hotels in our community that provide great services that bring visitors to Roseville, that bring a lot of vitality to our community, and it's a great asset to have. And we understand that given the congregation of people, you may have particular issues, but we work very, very well. Police, fire, and community development work very, very well with the majority of our hotels. And if there are any particular issues, they're taken care of and dealt with. Unfortunately, we have some that aren't that way, and that's why we're here today. And I wish we didn't even have to have this conversation, that we could compel those hotels to do that. So I've been very upfront about that as I've talked on Visit Roseville board, as well as when we met with the hotel operators, that this is really shouldn't be seen as shame on you. You guys are operating a bad business. It's really trying to deal with some persistent problems we just can't get ahead of. But thank you for bringing that up, because that's very true and accurate, and I failed to mention that.
No problem.
Right, any other questions from council for staff? I do want to provide an opportunity for members of the public to speak to this proposed licensing scheme and ordinance. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening? Does not appear to be the case. With that, I know we've got the ordinance before us. I know we've had some discussion about aspects of it, and I also know that there wasn't necessarily an expectation to pass the ordinance, although we did do all the things necessary in terms of notice, et cetera, so that the council could do that. It sounds like, and perhaps council correct me if I'm wrong, that we want to refer this back to staff to either research things we asked for research on or make adjustments that we asked to be made, and then bring this back. Is that correct?
And I'd like to have a council member who's missing have some input too.
All right. So, and I think that was staff's expectation, is that this would not be necessarily acted upon this evening. So we've got, I think, some good things to take a look at and have back before us then at a future time. And certainly at that time, I'm imagining that we'll make the hotel operators aware of that particular date, as well as an opportunity to once again be able to weigh in before final adoption.
Yes.
All right. Very good. Thank you to everyone who's been involved in this process, and I know this is of great interest to the council and members of the community as well. So we look forward to this coming back for further consideration. With that, that brings us then to business item 7D, which is to consider reappointments to our advisory commissions. And a number, or at least I was thinking that we had taken action on this back in January when we had looked at the process for reappointments, but in actuality we did not. And so that's why this is before us this evening. I don't believe at the time in January when we looked at this that there was any concern on the part of council members as to those who were seeking reappointments, but we do have the request this evening to reappoint the 9 listed commissioners for the Human Rights Inclusion Engagement Commission, Parks and Rec, Planning, Police Civil Service, and Public Works, Environment, and Transportation as they're listed in the request for council action. Council, are there any questions or discussions or a motion to reappoint?
I move to reappoint these
Second.
individuals.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to reappoint the 9 individuals outlined in the council or staff report. All those, any discussion by members of the council, either maker or seconder of the motion?
Just a quick thank you, you know. I think that they've done some really great work. I try to watch as many meetings as I can, and got some really good advice for us and good thoughts.
Great. Seconder.
Rob,
Okay. Councilmember Schroeder?
Just a clarification, I agree, I think we have some really good people. With the, where we, I believe I wasn't at the meeting, but you had decided that we were not going to, appoint new people to the HRIC. And so I didn't know if that also included reappointment or not.
You know, honestly, I don't think we specifically talked about that. Because of that, I think specifically that language that evening was talking about the new appointment process.
Yeah, I think so.
So I
I just wanted to clarify.
want to double check, with the council. That's a good point. Is there any reason we wouldn't just go ahead and reappoint the one individual to the HRIC?
No, I think so, because we're in a time, that would be my opinion, because we're in a time frame where we were, just didn't want to bring new people. My understanding was we did a lot of discussion about onboarding new people in this but this would be someone who's already on it.
So that you guys were comfortable
Yeah,
with that?
I
Okay.
am.
Okay.
Thanks. So.
I just wanted
Well,
to.
and I just was echoing the thanks for the people who who stepped forward and wanted, and I actually think it's really important to reappoint in the HRIEC because it is going to be such a regrowth, and this person knows that. I think it's really important to affirm their commitment to being part of the team, because I think if we push that out, that maybe would make them not feel like it's something that they wanted to continue to do. So I think I would really like to include that in the reappointment.
Right? And these are reappointments for full terms, so it would be a three-year term, correct, for everyone. All right, we've got the motion before us then. Is there any other discussion? Right, hearing none, all those in favor of those reappointments indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. Those members, existing members are reappointed to full terms. That then brings us to our second item related to commission appointments this evening. We've got 2 vacancies on our Finance Commission, which are both full terms. We also have 2 vacancies on the Parks and Rec Commission, which are also full terms. Staff has provided the tabulations of the responses and preferences of the various council members, and then separate from the tabulations, we also have the thoughts of the chairs of those 2 commissions and or vice chairs, depending on who is participating in that process. So with that, first we have the consideration of appointments for the Finance Commission. Is there a motion for one or both appointments?
I would move to appoint the 2 with the highest tallies.
That would be Mr. Davy and Ms. Vervoort.
Yep, and the terms are the same.
They're the same, yes, full
Yes,
terms.
so that's why you don't need to do them separately.
Second.
Right, that's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Strawn, once again to appoint Mr. Davy and Ms. Vervoort to the Finance Commission for those full terms. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing any of those names. Discussion on the motion as the maker, Councilmember Schroeder.
No.
As the seconder, Councilmember Strawn. Other discussion on the motion?
I just would like to say I did call Mr. Davy and had a good conversation, so I'm very pleased that we were able to do that since he wasn't able to attend the other. And I think they'll have good input on the commission.
Right. Other discussion? I would concur with that, and once again, as with a lot of our appointment processes, we had a lot of good applicants
We
to
did.
consider.
Goodness.
And sometimes these come down to fine
Yeah.
differences between people, and so
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that everybody who doesn't get appointed knows that we appreciated them coming forward, we appreciated their interest in serving, and I believe anyone would have been good in service, but I think these 2 are the candidates to appoint at this time. With that, we've got the motion before us to appoint those 2 individuals to the Finance Commission. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. Those people are appointed, and then we have the Parks and Recreation Commission. Is there a motion from the council?
Motion to appoint the 2 with the most tallies, Mr. Chad Kustra and Jamison Penny,
Second.
All right.
to the 2 full terms.
Yes.
That's what I was gonna say.
All right, on the Parks and Rec Commission, and it was seconded by Councilmember Groff. Once again, that's the appointment of Mr. Kustra and Mr. Penny. Discussion on that motion as the maker, Councilmember Strawn.
This was a really strong pool of people. I think in any other day, we could have gone completely different. It was really nice to see such really passionate people who were willing to offer their time for this service. So.
And as the seconder, Councilmember Groff.
I would just agree with that. I was thinking of how to even, we have to make some choices, but it was difficult because anyone that applied they were very knowledgeable and they were very, they would have very good input for the city. And I think, of course, I know you always say this, Mayor, but don't apply again and look at other commissions because we'd love to have them working with the city on these issues.
Right. Other discussion, Councilmember Schroeder.
I did want to say I really appreciated having the opportunity to watch the interviews since I did not have I was not in town to be able to attend them, and so I agree. I saw their application, but to actually watch them, it really showed the strong candidates we had, so that was good.
I fully agree, being in the same situation.
Good, good. And I will add that echo what Councilmember Groff said about reaching out to Mr. Davy on the previous commission. It was very helpful that he made himself available,
Yes.
and hopefully everybody was able to avail themselves of that. And I just want to also note, I think this round of appointments continues to demonstrate that we need to do some work on reaching out to a diverse pool of applicants. Because I think that was the one thing, with all the great people we had here, that was the one thing I think that we were still missing from consideration. And so that continues to be something as a city we need to focus on and work harder at. So I just wanted to make that note as well. We do have the motion before us to appoint those two individuals, Mr. Kustra and Mr. Penny, to the Parks and Rec Commission for full terms ending in 2027. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. Those appointments are made. Congratulations to those four individuals. And once again, as Councilmember Groff said, for those who weren't appointed, try again.
And just tell them how they'll be notified.
Oh, right, and staff will be following up with everybody who applied, whether they were appointed or not, within the next few days here, I'm sure, to let folks know. And there'll be an onboarding process for the new the new appointments, and we're continuing to fine tune that and improve that. So hopefully, this will be the best round of that yet that we have. All right, with that, then we don't have any council minutes to consider this evening. That brings us right to the consent agenda. No items were removed. Mr. Trudgeon, would you give us a brief rundown of those items?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10A approves payments in the amount of $166,146.97. Agenda item 10B approves several expenditures, including the replacement of the rubber flooring in the lobby changing area of the Oval, exterior painting of the skating center, and the purchase of a new boiler and HVAC system for the police department, both of which are 20 years old at the end of their useful life. Agenda item 10C adopts a resolution accepting donations made in 2023 to the Roseville Police Department. A total of $25,826 was donated to the City Police Department. We thank all the donors for their generous donations. Item 10D receives the annual Police Department forfeiture account summary. Agenda item 10E approves the city applying for the 2024 AARP Community Challenge Grant to support the work of the Police Department's Community Action Teams, Embedded Social Workers, and Housing Navigator. Receiving the funding will provide resources to allow members of the CAT to become a mobile outreach unit to provide on-site and in-person assistance to navigate the housing and financial assistance programs. Item 10F approves a memorandum of understanding with the law enforcement labor services unions representing police sergeants, lieutenants, and the deputy chief regarding the retention incentive payments. Item 10G adopts a resolution approving the master agreement for maintenance of traffic control signals with Ramsey County. This agreement will create uniformity on traffic signal maintenance and operational responsibilities between the city and the county. The master agreement will replace separate agreements in place for each signal in Roseville for county roads and their traffic signals that are located on them. Item 10H approves the street naming policy. This item was discussed by the City Council at the September 25th, 2023 meeting and sent to the Public Works, Environment, and Transportation Commission for additional review. The commission met on January 23rd and reviewed the final draft. It made one change regarding the notification procedure and recommends the City Council approve the policy as presented in your packet. And then finally, item 10I approves plans and specifications and orders the advertisement of bids for the reconstruction of County Road B from Cleveland Avenue West to Eustis Street. In addition, this action also approves a resolution prohibiting parking on County Road B except in parking bays that will be constructed as part of the project. And that is the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on the motion?
I
Councilmember
wanted to
Strawn.
mention, I was really excited about that AARP Community Challenge Grant and what options, especially the breadth of potential funding that could come with it and the average funding, and I appreciate the ongoing bringing forward of different grants in order to continue our great programming.
Good observation. We have the motion before us then. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0, and those items are approved or received. That brings us then to future agenda review, communications reports, announcements. We'll start with the future agenda. Mr. Trudgeon.
Yeah, I'll just talk about the two remaining meetings in March. Just as a reminder, I will not be at either, unfortunately. Rebecca Olson, Assistant City Manager, will be taking my place.
The meeting next Monday is more of a work session. We just have 3 items. One is to receive a presentation from Ramsey County about the Dale Street project and the work they're planning on for that. We also want to bring forth the ordinance amendment for the commission scope and duties and functions for the majority of the commissions. The council has seen this, but this is kind of just some final tweaks to it, so I would expect that to go forward pretty quickly. And then the other item is probably a lengthier discussion. That's about the whole HRIC, Human Rights Inclusion Engagement Commission, scope, duties, and functions. This is an opportunity for the council to really talk about, what you all see as their scope, duties, and functions, and you haven't had that opportunity to have a group discussion. So this will be a work session, so we'll be at the table. So hopefully it lend itself to some good conversation for the council.
Councilmember Strong?
Will members of the HRIEC be present for that discussion?
Yes, Councilmember Strawn, they are aware of it. We did tell them this wasn't necessarily a joint meeting, but they're welcome to attend. My understanding is they all plan to be here.
Okay,
for the meeting.
thank you,
And certainly there'll be an opportunity for public comment, which would include those members.
thank you.
Councilmember Schroeder?
Yeah, I just wanted, there had been, Jason and I were doing the subcommittee on that one, and we did have lots of conversations with multiple people. So we have captured a lot of voices, but they will also be able to be, and that we will also present a possible idea on where to go forward with it. So we're looking forward to it. So hopefully, we did capture some of the voices or a lot of them, but again, they're open to come and also be part of that. So
Thank you. One other question.
Sure.
Our new DEI person, will they be able to have an opinion or offer any input into this? I know it's unfortunate on timing that they just got here, but it seems like they may have some ideas that would be valuable in our discussion.
As of right now, no, because the person won't start until March 25th. But as this evolves over into the rest of the spring, certainly be able to have some opportunity.
But Rebecca was involved with it, and she had been very much involved with our last manager, so she did have some really good input.
Great. I just thought maybe our new person would come
Yeah,
with some ideas,
close.
but it's a little too soon. They're not even started.
Well, and hopefully, the 11th is the start of the conversation and,
Right.
and not the end of it anyway, so that person would still have a chance to weigh in. All right.
Okay, and then just on the 18th, the following week, recognition of the outgoing commissioners. We do want to talk about grants from the police department. We did receive a grant to fund the housing navigator position for 2 years from the state, which we're really excited about, and beyond that, actually, for other resources, not just for staffing. We thought it'd be a good opportunity to formally accept it, but also have Carrie McCollar here, our housing navigator, just talk a little bit about some of the work she's doing. I know all of you are pretty familiar with it, but it's good just to keep talking about it and bring that up. So we'll have the opportunity. We'll have the excess cash reserve report we bring forward to kind of close the books in 2023, and then make any particular decisions on regarding any excess funds. And then we'll bring back the 2 ordinances we talked about last meeting, the water meter security deposits, and that was more cleanup of some language. The second one is maybe a longer discussion about private wells, about maybe have some exceptions based on distance and things like that. So staff is working on that. I don't know if we've come to any resolution on that as of today, but we're working on that as well. So we'll bring back both those ordinances for your consideration and approval if you're ready. That's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Are there any council member initiated items for future meetings or reports or announcements from council members this evening? Councilmember Groff.
Just a report. I went to the Highway 36 event at Roseville Mall on Saturday, and it was really well attended. It was giving people an idea of what will be happening this summer as far as closures and so on. So if anyone, we should all be interested because Highway 36 is such a major thoroughfare. Mm-hmm. So there will be some closures on some weekends and things like that, and you can look at their website, of course, to find that out. But I thought that the participation from the attendees was really, really good, and I thought the people working from I think it was the county, if I remember right, were very knowledgeable and answered questions really well, so that was well done. So
Good. Was that, I thought there was a part of that was to talk also about sort of that study of the future of Highway 36. Was that much
That was
discussed?
a little bit, but most of this was actually about, the biggest item I'd say was about whether or not Hamlin will have an access to
Oh, okay.
36.
Okay.
And it looked like it probably won't, is my guess, but I don't know if that isn't finally decided. Then there was also a lot of discussion on bike paths and walking paths and how you get across 36.
Sure.
So that it isn't quite as isolating for people that don't use a car.
Good. I appreciate that update. The only thing I'll add is that you mentioned that they have information available on their website. You can actually sign up on their website to get
Yes.
email updates or any other form of update on that 36 project. And I found for other projects that MnDOT has been doing that affect my commute, it was really helpful to have those email updates because it kind of gives you that reminder that this is the weekend that closure is going to happen.
Because we won't remember right now what's
Right,
gonna happen in July.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I would definitely encourage members of the public and council members and staff to sign up to get those emails because it can really help you avoid a pickle, you might say.
And the only other thing is that I did attend the Visit Roseville meeting last week. We have them every other month. And they did discuss the ordinance from tonight. And as I said, most of the hotels, of course, the ones who attend there are all on board. They just want to make sure it is carefully thought through. And I think that's what we're doing. So.
Good. All right. Councilmember Strawn.
Just a reminder that tomorrow's primary election. So if you're interested in voting, and hopefully you are, you will seek out your polling place and exercise your right to vote.
And that's specifically the presidential primary, if I remember right. The normal state and city office primary is August, but this is the presidential primary, which is kind of important too, I guess. So,
And
encourage
it's different
people
than
to-
usual, so
Right,
it's not
yeah.
on people's
Yeah.
radar,
I
but
think
that
this
it is
is
tomorrow.
only the second time that the state of Minnesota has done a presidential primary, at least in recent years. So, exactly. And it only happens every 4 years. Right. All right. Anything else from council members by way of announcements or communications? Otherwise, the only thing we have left on our agenda this evening is a motion to adjourn.
So second.
Oh, Councilmember Schroeder moved, Councilmember Strawn seconded the motion to adjourn. No discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. We are adjourned at 7:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone.